Good evening, ladies and gentlemen, boys and girls, children of all ages. Welcome to the Karey Carbaugh podcast, episode number 4. Sorry I'm a few minutes late here. I had a little bit of technical difficulties, but looks like we're on now, so I appreciate those of you who are joining me live and those of you who will be watching this on the replay. Thank you so much. As usual, I'm not going to try to respond to uh, chats and messages during the podcast, but I will look through those and I will respond afterwards. And I definitely appreciate all of the positive feedback. I'm just blown away with the support that you all have given me over the past few weeks as I've done the first 3. I've been blown away, quite honestly. I've been very humbled and very blown away by the support that you all have shown me. So thank you very much. Truly, I sincerely do appreciate that. So let's get on with tonight's topic. Before I do that, I've forgotten to do this a couple of times, so let me introduce myself first. My name is Karey Carbaugh, hence the name of the podcast, the Karey Carbaugh Podcast. And I have only been doing these a few weeks, but a little bit about me. I've been a computer programmer, database guy, working with data. I currently work for a local community college here in the Office of the Registrar, so I'm relatively familiar with online things, but getting into these podcasts has definitely stretched me a bit. So I do appreciate all you bearing with me as I have become a little more familiar with this and been getting used to it. As some of you know, I am visually impaired, so that also presents another bit of a challenge with doing some of these, because sometimes seeing some of the things on the screen while I'm trying to focus on the camera and looking at all of you lovely people, that makes it a little bit difficult. I will go into more of my story in one of the future podcasts. I'm thinking here very shortly I will give you a bit more of my background. But tonight, I really wanted to focus. It's interesting how God works. As I've shared with many of you before, I am a believer. I am a Christian. I'm not going to hide that. I know not all of you are, and that's okay. I appreciate you joining me, even if you're not a believer, even if you don't believe in the same things that I do. I appreciate you tuning in and listening and taking something away from these podcasts that may help you as well. But I don't want to sugarcoat it. I am a believer, and that's one of the reasons that I've come to the topic of tonight's podcast, which is speaking the truth in love. It's interesting how God works, because as I've been struggling to come up with topics each week, it seems like I always get a message either in a Bible study that I'm involved in or my pastor at church. God is good, and He's providing me with the material that I believe He wants me to share with you all. So tonight's topic, speaking the truth in love. What does that mean? Well, think of maybe a disagreement that you've had with someone, maybe someone you are close to, maybe a partner, maybe a spouse, maybe a child. Someone that you're in a relationship with that you've had difficulties with and maybe gotten into a disagreement. And perhaps you believe that what you know is true. But the other person also believes that what they know is true. But if you're at opposite ends on something, both cannot be true. The truth never changes. Sometimes in a disagreement or an argument, the truth is somewhere in the middle. And both sides may have part of the truth. But the truth never changes. If you look at a horse has 4 legs. A dog has 4 legs. That truth never changes. Now, someone may have experienced an animal like a horse or a dog that's lost one of its legs, maybe in an accident or something, and they could argue, well, no, a dog can have 3 legs. I have a friend who has a cat who only has 3 legs. That is also true. But that is true because of a certain circumstance. And the truth of the fact, or the fact of the matter is, cats, by their nature, have 4 legs. Well, you could argue and you could disagree about that, but speaking the truth in love requires recognizing the other person's perspective. It requires acknowledging that other person's perspective, taking it into account with your perspective, and maybe coming to an understanding that while the truth is the truth and doesn't change, there could be a compromise position in the middle that gets at the real truth. As I was thinking about this, and before I spin off into the direction I was thinking just a second ago, the real important thing is not only sticking your ground and saying, well, by golly, this is the truth. That may be true. But in a relationship, it's important to recognize how we bring about that truth and how we work with the other person to explain that truth. If you're watching me live, put a live in the chat now, just to get a little engagement here so that you all don't fall asleep on me. If you're watching this on the replay, put a replay in the chat, if you would, please. But back to my point here. The truth is the truth and doesn't change. But the way we can bring about the conversation could acknowledge and respect the other person's perspective. A couple of biblical stories that came to mind as I was thinking about this, and I didn't get a chance to look up the Bible references, but for those of my friends out there that are Christians, you'll probably remember both of these stories. Jesus at the well is one of them. And Jesus is sitting there with a woman, or standing there at the well with a woman, that he knows, and he knows her truth. But when she engages in conversation, or he actually initiates it and asks her for a drink from the well, and she says, if you knew who I was, you would not be asking me for a drink. Because she knew that she had things in her past that she wasn't very proud of. As a believer, we would call those sins. But she knew that, and Christ knew that. That truth was truth. There was no getting around that. She knew it, and he knew it, and that truth was truth. But rather than confronting her directly with it, as Jesus could have done because he knew the truth, he looks at her and he explains to her who he is and brings about her admission of the truth. And she said, well, I don't have a husband. And of course, Jesus confirms that. He said, you're right, you don't. You've had several husbands. And so rather than confronting her directly with it, he brings it about and gets her to admit the truth. And then he confirms the truth. And I believe that that is a message for us on how we can bring about not only truth, but reconciliation of relationships. By recognizing the other person's perspective, and by acknowledging their perspective and getting them to come around to the truth. This is just one example, and of course some things are not quite that easy to reconcile if the other person is completely off mark on the truth. But I think in many cases we can bring that about in a way that can reconcile the relationship while still getting at what is true. Because two opposites cannot both be true. The other example that I thought of from the Bible, once again, is when Jesus is standing there and people are getting ready to stone a woman. Not to harp on the whole thing of adultery and sexual sin, but both of these examples happen to fall into that category. And Jesus looks at the crowd and he says, "Fine, go ahead and stone this woman. Any one of you who has never done anything wrong in your life, never lied, never cheated, never stolen, whoever among you is absolutely perfect, let that person throw the stone." And then Jesus, kind of in his own sort of way, goes back to his scribbling in the dirt. I sort of picture a child sitting there, although Jesus was an adult by this point, but you know how kids sit there and write with a stick in the dirt. That's kind of how it's described what Jesus did after that. He's just kind of going about his own business and doing his own thing, and he says, we'll let them figure it out. But the truth, once again, came out. And when he looks up a few minutes later, who's left with the woman? Only Jesus. He's the only one standing there. And, of course, for those of us who are believers, we know that Jesus has not sinned. And she looks at him and she goes, "Well, do you fault me?" And he said, "No, I don't fault you. Just go home and don't continue to sin. Do your best." Maybe she had done other things against other people. And he encourages her. Be forgiven and go home and just don't continue to make the same mistakes. Once again, the truth is the truth. Was it confronted directly? Not really. But was it revealed? Absolutely. In a confrontational way? No, not really. But the truth did come out. And both Jesus and this other woman knew the truth and agreed on the truth, even though they might not have agreed on it in the beginning. So that's the message that I have here for you tonight is, what does it mean to speak the truth in love? It means recognizing that other person's perspective, seeking out the real truth, and doing it in a loving and respectful manner for that other person. I believe that that's what we're all called to do in our day-to-day lives, whether you're a Christian, whether you're a believer, whether you're not, whether you're just a person trying to be kind to those people around them. Speak the truth, but do it in love. Because if you don't, if you confront it directly, and if you stick to your guns, a lot of times, I don't know if any of you have experienced it, after you win the argument, maybe you're right, and maybe that is the truth, but then you look over at the other person and you see that they're defeated. Have you really won the argument, even though maybe the point you were arguing about, you were right and you knew the truth? But have you really won the argument if you've broken that other person down and defeated them in that way? Probably not. So that's my message for you tonight. Speak the truth in love. Take that with you throughout this week, and I just encourage you to be blessed and to have a blessed week. And I will jump on here again next Tuesday, and we'll see what kind of wisdom gets thrown my way that I decide to share next week. And by all means, if any of you guys have any suggestion, guys or gals, I know it's not totally politically correct to say you guys, but it's a habit that I got to break. So anybody that has any suggestions, topics you'd like me to cover, drop them in the chat. Send me a message. If you'd like me to reach out to you directly and let you know when I'm doing these podcasts so that you can be sure to be ready and jump on if you're not seeing my messages when I post them on Facebook, DM me your email address and I would be most happy to add you to my email list and send you out a personal invitation to these podcasts, because I'm trying to build this up, and hopefully we can make this a very positive and inspiring community. So thank you very much for jumping on here. I don't want to take any more of your time. Have a blessed week, and I will see you on the Karey Carbaugh podcast next week. Take care. God bless, and have a good week. Bye.